Now, our top story of the hour, the business of bearing arms. President Obama is due in Arizona later in this hour to deliver a memorial speech to the victims of Saturday's mass shooting in Tucson. In the aftermath of that attack, many are turning their attention to this weapon. It's the Austrian-made Glock 19. It's the type used by suspected gunman Jared Loughner. And according to Bloomberg's reporting, these guns are flying off the shelves. The reason, gun enthusiasts believe the government may try to ban the weapon as a result of this tragic incident. For more, we're joined by John Lott, a professor of the University of Maryland, College Park. John Lott is one of the most respected researchers on guns in the country. He is the author of the book, More Guns, Less Crime. We're going to get more details on the book. And also, we have watching the situation from Capitol Hill is Fiscal Times Washington editor Eric Pianin. Eric has been following the political tug of war in Congress since he arrived in Washington, D.C. in 1981. And also, we have Michael Riley of Bloomberg News. He wrote the story about how gun sales, particularly of the Glock 19, have been increasing. Michael, just give us the details. What's the situation right now with gun sales, particular to the Glock 19?
You know, it's interesting. We talked to some gun dealers in Arizona, and they said that they were flying off the shelves. One gun owner, a guy who owns a store called Glockmeister, said that his volumes had about doubled. The FBI tracks numbers, but it doesn't do it by specific make or model. But we did find that across the country, handgun sales were up, and they were way up in particular states, including Arizona, New York, Ohio, and California.
John Lott, what do you make of this this situation where you're seeing this increase in sales? Are you surprised by it? A lot of your research really deals with the behavior or relationship of gun laws and the actual ownership of guns. What do you take away from this?
Well, this is, first of all, this is an increase on top of an increase in sales that we've had over the last 2 years to begin with. Since November 2008, there's been a fairly significant increase, maybe about a 30 to 40% increase in gun sales. You've had about a 25% increase in the number of people in the U.S. who have concealed handgun permits. It's about 6.5 million Americans that now have concealed handgun permits. So this increase is on top of what was already a fairly large increase to begin with. I think it's basically, though, just because of the crime, not that. Because I don't think many people think right now that the government's going to pass strong new gun control. I think people realize that there was a benefit, or would have been a benefit, if somebody had been there earlier at the scene in order to try to stop the attack. And they realize that even though the police are extremely important in stopping crimes, probably my research thinks the single most important factor, that the police can't be there all the time to protect you. And it raises the question, what do you do when you're having to confront a criminal by yourself? And people realize that they may be the final line of defense in that situation.
Mr. Pianin, what do you make of what Professor Lott is describing, this situation that maybe the gun sale increase has less to do with people worrying about changes in the law and more to do with people just wanting to protect themselves?
Well, I think there's a lot to that. We're sort of into a lawless phase where everybody seems to have access to guns. Efforts by Congress in the past to limit even the most dangerous of guns, automatic weapons, and huge clips to go with them, have been frustrated by Republican and conservative opposition, a very effective lobby headed by the National Rifle Association. And so we're left with a situation where gun laws vary from state to state. Arizona has probably the most lenient of gun laws, very permissive. There just doesn't seem to be a legislative solution to this problem right now.
John Lott, what do you make of that comment? Because I want to get your thoughts on this idea that it isn't necessarily gun control that we need to focus on, but it's maybe the specific weapon and that big magazine of bullets.
Right. Well, first of all, the assault weapons ban didn't deal with machine guns, didn't deal with automatic weapons. It dealt with semi-automatics, which basically guns that one pull the trigger, release one bullet. You know, I don't know of any academic study by a criminologist or an economist that found that either passing the assault weapons ban or when it sunset in 2004 had any impact on crime rates. the magazines. It'd be nice if you could try to keep criminals from getting guns. That's what we all want to try to do. But magazines are very easy to make. They're just a simple metal box that's there.
All right. Professor Lott, continue your thought there, this idea that the perhaps magazine that was being used in this particular incident, you don't think that it's possible that we could get some kind of incremental changes in law that would make it more difficult for people to actually get these kinds of things? I mean, this doesn't seem like the kind of thing you'd need on any kind of daily basis unless you're in law enforcement or in the military.
Right. Well, just one thing to make clear, there's nothing unique about the Glock with regard to these magazines. Any semi-automatic gun that can take a magazine of any length. I mean, the magazine can extend below the handle grip of the gun. And that's true for all semi-automatic guns that take the magazine. So I don't see any particular reason to focus on the Glock here. It'd be nice if you had some magic bullet, so to speak, to deal with stopping criminals from going and getting guns. But the benefits that you can say for a criminal having a particular type of gun, that often applies to the same benefits for the police or civilians for being able to use a gun to protect themselves, whether it's easily concealable, whether it can go and hold a number of bullets. There are benefits that you can make for having that defensively. And there's lots of good people out there. There are relatively few bad people. And, I suppose the ultimate gun law is just to ban guns. And I would think people have seen how lack of success there's been with that, whether it's been D.C. or Chicago. Basically, when you look around the world, as well as in the United States, when we've had gun bans, murder rates have never gone down. They've either gone up slightly or they've gone up a lot. And the problem that you face with all these gun control laws is that you have to ask yourself who's most likely to obey them. And it turns out it's the law-abiding good citizens that you're most likely to disarm and affect, and not the criminals. And to the extent you make it harder for law-abiding citizens to defend themselves, you actually encourage crime. Let me bring
in Eric Pianin into this discussion as well. Eric, you're hearing what Professor Lott is saying. Do you think that there's a middle ground somewhere where, I mean, we don't have to sort of talk about it in terms of black and white, but is there some middle ground that would produce some kind of more effective monitoring of either the guns itself or the automatic weapons that might at least mitigate some of the catastrophes associated with these weapons?
Well, the professor is kind of discouraging in his analysis. You sort of throw up your hands in despair and say, well, what can you do to control the flow and sale and use of guns? And he's probably right that criminals will always find a way to get it, and that even municipalities or states like the District of Columbia that tried to ban weapons found it a hopeless cause because they were surrounded by states that freely sell guns. So I don't know that there is a magic solution. I also think that the political debate in Washington has shifted so dramatically to the right on the whole issue of gun control that even people like Representative Carolyn McCarthy, who is talking about trying to reinstate this ban on high-capacity ammunition clips, even she realizes that it's probably a losing cause, and it's probably the most that she could get through this Congress with Republicans now in control of the House. And as I mentioned earlier, National Rifle Association, such a formidable political lobby, probably one of the premier lobbies in Washington, with lots and lots of money to spend on lobbying. I think they spent $2 million last year alone on lobbying. They've got a huge political action committee that raised and distributed maybe $15 million in the last election cycle. That's very formidable opposition to any kind of meaningful gun control.
Mike O'Reilly, I want to give you at least 30 seconds here. From your reporting, are people buying more guns because they're afraid or because they're worried that they won't be able to own them? I mean, people just adding to their collections.
I think it's a little bit of both. There's also just another facet. Talked to a dealer who just dealt likely it just dealt specifically in Glocks, and he said it's partly publicity. He compared it to professional football jerseys, that the Glock is now in the news, and so when people came in to his store looking for what they wanted to buy, they talked about a Glock.
All right, we're going to Michael Riley. If you take a look right now at the culture that exists in the United States, is it, in your reporting, is it predisposed to owning guns? I mean, after all, the United States is the home of the Western, and a lot of the growth in the gun industry has very mirrored some of the Americans' fascination with those types of images. Is that part of it? Is that what you're hearing from your reporting?
That's right, especially with the reporting we were doing in Arizona. They talked a lot about Arizona as a state and a place, a culture that embraces guns, including the fact that the congresswoman who was shot, Gabrielle Giffords, herself once boasted of owning a gun, in fact, of owning a Glock. A lot of gun owners said, look, this is just the way we do things. You have to keep in mind, Arizona is an open carry state. You are allowed to carry a pistol anywhere in public as long as you carry it on your hip. Last year, they actually extended that anyone can carry a concealed weapon without a permit. It's only one of 3 states in the country where you can do that.
Now, Professor Lott, the research that you've done for your book, you've made the connection that gun ownership actually equals lower crime rates. Have you had any sort of detailed comparison between how the United States ranks opposed to other countries?
Right. Well, I mean, this is pretty much a phenomenon that you see worldwide, that as gun ownership increases, you see drops in violent crime. I mean, people will point to countries such as the UK or other places which have lower murder rates, but actually, as they've had new gun control laws, their murder rates and other violent crime rates have actually risen relative to what it was previously. You know, you can deter criminals with higher arrest rates or higher conviction rates, but the fact that a would-be victim might be able to defend themselves can also deter criminals from occurring. You know, Bill Landis and I, Bill at the University of Chicago, we looked at all the multiple victim public shootings in the United States from 1977 through 1999. And the one thing that we found that most dramatically reduced the rates of these attacks was the fact that would-be victims might be able to defend themselves with concealed handguns. The normal things with law enforcement, police, arrest rates, conviction rates didn't matter, because in 75% of the time, these guys die at the scene. And the other 25%, they believe they were going to die at the scene. And law enforcement punishes these people after the fact. And to the extent that you can deter them, you know, these guys view these crimes as a way of committing suicide, and they want to go out very frequently with the most attention they can. And if they believe that they can kill more people, they talk about it in their notes, that they'll get more attention.
But Professor Lott, I mean, what about the law enforcement officials that were for some ban of certain types of assault weapons? Did they get it wrong, or are they seeing something that you're not seeing?
Well, okay, you know, assault weapons, it's a big misnomer. People think this is somehow machine guns or something. An assault weapon may look the same as an AK-47 or an Uzi on the outside, but what's actually the inside guts of it's the same as a deer hunting rifle. It's just some people like the way the guns look on the outside. Functionally, they're the same as any other semi-automatic rifle that we sell in the United States. And so it's not too surprising that these laws that we had with the assault weapons ban had absolutely no effect really on anything. I don't know of any, again, I don't know of any study by a criminologist or an economist in any refereed journal that's found that it had any statistical impact at all on any crime rates.
Eric Pianin, all right, we're getting ready for President Obama. He's going to be speaking at that memorial for the victims of the shooting in Tucson, Arizona. What's next in Washington?
Well, I think there's a lot of soul searching going on. There was a memorial service earlier today in the House of Representatives. John Boehner, the new Speaker of the House, spoke emotionally about broken spirits, or broken hearts, but strong spirits. I think that we're going to see sort of a dual track discussion, one having to do with the political rhetoric, the sort of inflammatory political rhetoric that we've been hearing on the campaign trail and in the halls of Congress for the past few years, and calls for trying to tone down the rhetoric and to seek more comedy in the legislative process. But also, I think we will see efforts both in the House and the Senate to try to find some legislative response to this dreadful shooting, just as Congress tried to do something after the Virginia Tech shootings, just as years ago the Brady legislation came out of the assassination attempt against Ronald Reagan. I would expect we're going to have some debate. But again, even Carolyn McCarthy, who is the leading proponent for gun controls in the House and whose husband was killed
We need to leave it there,
1994.
unfortunately, gentlemen. I want to appreciate your coming on. John Lott, Eric Pianin, Mike O'Reilly. Coming up.